The alpha king's eyes lock onto hers. Impossible. The mate bond flares between them, the most powerful wolf alive, and her, the omega scrubbing his floors with bleeding hands. He sees the scars, the exploitation, the debt that will never end, and his voice drops to a lethal whisper. She's mine now. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The scent of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the smell of blood. Kira Ashwood scrubbed the pack house floors on her hands and knees, her fingers raw and aching, watching pink-tinged water swirl down the drain. This was her life now, had been for 3 years, ever since her parents died and left her with nothing but debts and a reputation as the weakest omega in the Shadowmere pack. She could hear laughter from the dining hall above her. The pack was celebrating something. They were always celebrating something. Victories, matings, births, things that had nothing to do with her, things she would never be part of. The bucket beside her was nearly empty, the water gone cold hours ago, but Kira kept scrubbing because stopping meant going back to the storage room they'd given her as quarters, and that room was even colder than the water. A door slammed somewhere overhead, and Kira's shoulders tensed instinctively. Footsteps on the stairs. Multiple sets. She didn't look up, didn't stop scrubbing. Looking up meant making eye contact, and eye contact meant trouble. It always meant trouble. Still here, little rat? The voice belonged to Marcus, the beta's son. 22 years old and convinced the world owed him everything. Thought you'd have finished by now. It's been what, 6 hours? Kira kept her eyes on the floor, on the grout between tiles that would never quite come clean no matter how hard she scrubbed. Almost done, Marcus. Almost done, Marcus, he mimicked in a high-pitched whine. You hear that, guys? She's almost done. After 6 hours, she's almost done with a job that should take one. More laughter. Kira recognized the other voices. Damien, Marcus's best friend. Celine, the alpha's daughter who somehow managed to be even crueler than the males. And Theo, who'd been kind to her once, back before he realized kindness toward an omega like her would destroy his social standing. Maybe she's just slow, Celine said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You know what they say about omegas from weak bloodlines? More wolf than brain. The others laughed like this was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Kira's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Responding made it worse. It always made it worse. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, over and over again, until it was carved into her bones like the scars on her back from the last time she'd talked back. Marcus's boot appeared in her line of vision, right in the spot she'd just cleaned. He dragged it through the water deliberately, leaving a muddy streak across the tile. Oops, looks like you missed a spot. Kira's hand stilled on the brush. Every muscle in her body wanted to react, to say something, to do something. But she'd survived 3 years of this by being invisible, by being nothing. So she simply dipped her brush back in the bucket and started scrubbing the new stain. Pathetic, Celine muttered. My father should have kicked her out years ago. She's useless. Can't even shift properly. That was the worst part, the thing they all knew and loved to remind her of. Kira could shift, technically, but her wolf was small and weak, barely larger than a normal dog, with dull brown fur and none of the strength or grace that other pack wolves possessed. She was a genetic disappointment, her parents' final failure. Hey, rat, Damien's voice now closer than before. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her eyes down. Looking up meant seeing their faces, their contempt, their absolute certainty that she was beneath them. And right now, with her hands raw, and her body exhausted and her spirit hanging by the thinnest thread, she wasn't sure she could take that and remain standing. I said, "Look at me." A hand fisted in her hair, yanking her head back. Pain exploded across her scalp as Damien forced her to meet his eyes. "That's better. Now, I've got a question for you. Did you clean the Alpha's chambers today like you were supposed to?" Kira's mind raced. The Alpha's chambers. She'd been scheduled to clean them this morning, but Marcus had dumped an entire crate of spoiled meat in the pack house kitchen and told her to clean it up immediately or face punishment. She'd spent 4 hours scrubbing rotten blood and maggots off tile, and by the time she'd finished, she'd been too exhausted to remember anything else. "I'll do it now," she managed to say, her voice strained from the angle of her neck. "I'll go do it right now." "You'll do it right now," Damien repeated mockingly. "Hear that, Marcus? She'll do it right now. Except the Alpha specifically asked for his chambers to be clean this morning, and it's now 8 o'clock at night. So what do you think happens to Omegas who disobey direct orders?" Kira knew what happened. Everyone knew what happened. Public punishment in the training grounds, usually involving a whip and an audience that would pretend to look away, while secretly enjoying every moment of her humiliation. "Please," Kira whispered, hating herself for begging but unable to stop the word from escaping. "Please, I'll do it now. I'll work through the night. I'll make sure everything is perfect. Just please don't tell the Alpha." Damien's grip tightened in her hair, pulling harder. Tears sprang to Kira's eyes from the pain, but she refused to let them fall. "You think you can negotiate with me? You think you have any say in what happens to you? Let her go." The new voice cut through the hallway like a blade, cold and commanding. "Theo." But when Kira managed to glance toward him through the blur of pain, she saw no compassion in his expression, just calculation. "She's not worth the trouble. If we report her, we'll have to stay and watch the punishment. I've got better things to do tonight." Damien held her for another moment, making his point, then released her with a shove that sent her sprawling into the bucket. Cold, dirty water soaked through her clothes as the metal container clattered across the floor. The others laughed. That same easy, careless laughter that said she wasn't even worth their real attention. "Clean this up," Marcus said, gesturing at the spilled water, "and then get to the Alpha's chambers. If they're not perfect by morning, I'll report you myself." They left, their footsteps fading up the stairs, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Long after they'd disappeared, Kira sat in the puddle of dirty water, her hair dripping, her clothes soaked, her hands shaking with a combination of fear and rage and bone-deep exhaustion. She wanted to scream, wanted to shift and run and never come back, wanted to find some corner of the world where people like Marcus and Selene and Damien didn't exist, where being weak wasn't a crime punishable by endless cruelty. But she didn't scream, didn't run, didn't do anything except slowly gather up the spilled bucket and the scattered cleaning supplies, because this was her life. This was all her life had been for 3 years, and all it would ever be. She was Kira Ashwood, the weakest Omega in the Shadowmere pack, and survival meant accepting that some wolves were born to lead, while others were born to scrub floors. It took another hour to clean up the spilled water and finish the hallway. By the time Kira made it to the Alpha's chambers, it was past 9 o'clock, and her entire body felt like it was held together with nothing but stubborn will and the desperate need to avoid punishment. The Alpha's chambers occupied the entire 3rd floor of the pack house, a sprawling suite of rooms that Kira had cleaned hundreds of times, but never truly looked at. looking at things that could never be hers, only made the emptiness worse. So she worked mechanically, dusting surfaces, changing linens, scrubbing floors, her mind carefully blank. She was almost finished, working on the massive windows that overlooked the pack's training grounds, when she heard voices in the hallway outside, male voices, deep and authoritative, discussing something in tones too low for her to make out words. Kira's first instinct was to hide. Omegas weren't supposed to be seen unless absolutely necessary, and being caught in the Alpha's chambers this late could be interpreted as anything from incompetence to something far worse. But there was nowhere to hide. The chamber was open and expansive, designed to showcase power rather than provide concealment. So Kira did the only thing she could do. She kept cleaning, kept her head down, and prayed to the moon goddess that whoever was coming would simply ignore her existence. The door opened, footsteps entered, and then a voice she didn't recognize spoke, and every hair on Kira's body stood on end. "This is where the Shadowmere Pack houses their alpha?" The voice was deep, carrying an authority that made Kira's Omega nature want to submit immediately. "Impressive, though I've seen better." "Your Majesty is too kind." That was Alpha Cedric, leader of Shadowmere, and Kira could hear the tension in his voice. Whoever this visitor was, even Cedric feared him. "We do our best with what resources we have. Our territory may be small, but our loyalty to the crown is absolute, Your Majesty." Kira's hands froze on the window she'd been cleaning. There was only one person in all the territories who was addressed that way: the Alpha King himself, ruler of all packs in the northern region, the most powerful wolf alive. And he was here, in the Shadowmere Pack House, 10 feet away from where she knelt like a servant. "I'm sure it is." The king's voice was dry, almost amused. "Which is why I'm confused about the reports I've been receiving. Reports of territorial disputes with the Nightshade Pack. Reports of border incidents that violate the peace treaties I established 5 years ago." "Misunderstandings, Your Majesty. Nothing more. The Nightshade Pack has been aggressive in their expansion, and we've simply been defending what's ours." "Defending what's yours by raiding their hunting grounds and attacking their patrols." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Alpha Cedric, I didn't travel 3 days to listen to you lie to my face. I came here to determine whether the Shadowmere Pack is worth preserving or whether your territory should be absorbed by a pack that can actually maintain order." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Kira remained frozen by the window, not daring to move, barely daring to breathe. If the king was this angry with Alpha Cedric, being noticed right now could be a death sentence. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." Cedric's voice was strained now, the Alpha pride stripped away to reveal the fear underneath. "I spoke without thinking. The truth is, we've been struggling. Resources are scarce, and some of our wolves have taken matters into their own hands. But I assure you, I'll bring them under control immediately." "You have 1 month." The king's words fell like hammer blows. 1 month to resolve your disputes with Nightshade. 1 month to prove that Shadowmere deserves to remain autonomous. If I receive another report of border violations, I'll return. And when I return, it won't be for conversation. Understood, Your Majesty. Thank you for your mercy." Footsteps moved across the room, heading toward the door. Kira allowed herself the smallest breath of relief. They were leaving. She'd remain unnoticed. Everything would be fine. And then the footsteps stopped. Alpha Cedric, the king's voice again, but different now. Sharper, more focused. "Why is there an Omega cleaning your chambers at this hour?" Kira's heart stopped. Every muscle in her body locked up as she felt attention shift toward her, heavy and inescapable. She kept her head down, kept her eyes on the floor, but she could feel them looking at her, judging her, finding her wanting. "Your Majesty, she's nobody," Cedric's voice carried clear dismissal. "Just a servant, the weakest Omega in our pack. She's slow, so her tasks often run late. I apologize for the disturbance. Stand up." The command wasn't directed at Cedric. It was directed at her, and it carried such absolute authority that Kira's body obeyed before her mind could fully process the words. She stood slowly, her cleaning rag still clutched in one hand, and finally, reluctantly, raised her eyes. The Alpha King was nothing like she'd expected. She'd heard descriptions, of course. Everyone had heard descriptions. Massive, powerful, with dark hair and eyes that could freeze an enemy with a glance. Covered in scars from 100 battles. A face that showed no mercy and expected none in return. But the man standing 15 feet away from her didn't match those descriptions at all. He was tall, yes, and powerfully built. But his hair was lighter than she'd expected, almost bronze in the lamplight. His eyes were a strange shade of amber that seemed to glow with their own internal light. And his face, while hard, wasn't cruel. It was watchful, intelligent, like he saw everything and forgot nothing. Those amber eyes locked onto Kira, and she felt the impact like a physical blow. Something passed between them, something electric and undeniable, and Kira's wolf, her weak, pathetic wolf that barely ever stirred, suddenly surged to the surface with a recognition that stole her breath. Mate. No. Impossible. The moon goddess didn't pair weakest Omegas with Alpha Kings. That wasn't how the world worked. That wasn't how anything worked. Kira must be imagining it, her exhausted mind playing tricks, her desperate heart conjuring fantasies that had no basis in reality. But the king had gone completely still, his eyes widening fractionally, and in that moment Kira knew with absolute certainty that he felt it too, the bond, the pull, the impossible, undeniable truth that the moon goddess had paired them together. "What's your name?" The king's voice was rough now, strained in a way it hadn't been moments before. "Kira," her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Kira Ashwood, Your Majesty. Kira Ashwood." He repeated her name like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "How old are you?" 21, Your Majesty." "And you're unmated?" The question made her cheeks burn with shame. Everyone her age was mated or at least seriously courting. Everyone except her, the defective Omega that no wolf wanted. "Yes, Your Majesty." The king's eyes never left hers as he spoke to Alpha Cedric. "This Omega. She's under your protection?" "She works for the pack, Your Majesty. We provide her food and shelter in exchange for her labor." "That wasn't my question. I asked if she's under your protection, if she's valued as a member of your pack, if she's treated with the respect and dignity that all wolves deserve." Something in the king's tone made Alpha Cedric hesitate. When he finally answered, his voice was carefully neutral. "She's treated according to her station, Your Majesty, as are all our Omegas." The king's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see. And what exactly is her station?" "She's a servant Omega, Your Majesty. Her parents died in debt to the pack. She works to repay that debt." "Show me your hands, Kira Ashwood." Kira's first instinct was to hide them, to keep the evidence of her station concealed. "But you didn't disobey a direct command from the Alpha King." Slowly, reluctantly, she held out her hands, palms up. The skin was red and raw from chemicals and endless scrubbing. Her fingers were calloused and cracked, several nails broken down to the quick. There were scars, too, old ones from punishments and accidents, new ones from the work that never ended. They were the hands of someone who'd been worked to the bone and beyond, and there was no hiding what they represented. The king's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those amber eyes, something that looked almost like rage, carefully controlled. "How long have you been working off this debt?" 3 years, Your Majesty." "And how much longer do you have?" Kira glanced at Alpha Cedric, uncertain if she should answer. The Alpha's face was carefully blank, but she could see the warning in his eyes. Whatever she said next could have consequences far beyond this conversation. "I don't know, Your Majesty. I'm not told those details." "Alpha Cedric." The king's voice was soft now, dangerously soft. "How much did her parents owe?" "Your Majesty, pack finances are complicated. There are fees for housing, food, medical care over the years. Interest accumulates. It's not a simple calculation." "I didn't ask for a lecture on economics. I asked for a number. How much did her parents owe when they died?" Cedric's throat worked as he swallowed. 2,000 marks, Your Majesty." The number hit Kira like a punch. 2,000 marks. She'd been working for 3 years to repay 2,000 marks, a sum that should have been cleared in 6 months of normal labor, which meant everything else. All the extra years, all the abuse and cruelty and endless work had been nothing but exploitation. They'd been using her parents' debt as an excuse to keep her trapped, to have a servant they could abuse without consequence. 2,000 marks, the king repeated flatly. "And in 3 years of work, how much has she repaid?" "The exact accounting would require consulting our records, Your Majesty." "Then consult them. Now, I'll wait." Alpha Cedric's jaw clenched, but he moved to a desk in the corner of the chamber and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. He flipped through pages with fingers that trembled just slightly, and Kira realized with a shock that the Alpha was afraid, genuinely, deeply afraid of what the king might do. "According to our records," Cedric said after a long moment, "she has repaid 1,700 marks. 1,700 marks in 3 years. The king's voice was still soft, still dangerous. "That's approximately 47 marks per month, which should mean she has 300 marks remaining in her debt, correct?" "In theory, Your Majesty, but there are additional costs, damage to pack property, medical expenses when she's been injured, replacement costs for supplies she's broken. These things accumulate. So she's been working as your pack's slave for 3 years, repaying a debt that should have been settled months ago, and you've been adding charges to keep her trapped indefinitely. Is that an accurate summary, Alpha Cedric?" The silence that followed was deafening. Kira could barely breathe, could barely process what was happening. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in all the territories, was defending her, was questioning her treatment, was looking at Alpha Cedric like he was considering whether the man deserved to keep breathing. "Your Majesty, I assure you this is simply standard practice. Servant Omegas are common in many packs. The work they do is valuable, and the system benefits everyone involved. Everyone except the Omega being exploited." The king turned back to Kira, and those amber eyes held something she'd never seen directed at her before. Genuine concern. "Kira Ashwood, if I were to offer you a choice, what would you choose? To remain here working off a debt that will never truly be paid, or to leave with me and start a new life elsewhere?" Kira's mind reeled. A choice. He was offering her a choice, something she hadn't had in 3 years, something she'd almost forgotten existed. Her eyes darted to Alpha Cedric, seeing the barely concealed fury in his expression. If she said yes, if she agreed to leave, there would be consequences. The Alpha would find a way to punish her, to make her regret this moment of hope. But if she said no, if she stayed, she'd be right back where she started, scrubbing floors, enduring abuse, living a half-life that wasn't really living at all. And underneath it all, impossible to ignore, was the mate bond. Faint, but undeniable, pulling her toward this stranger who'd walked into her life and offered her something she'd thought was gone. Forever. Hope. I would choose to leave, Your Majesty. The words came out stronger than she'd expected, carrying a conviction she didn't know she still possessed. If you're truly offering me that choice, I would choose to leave. The king's expression softened just slightly, and Kira caught a glimpse of what lay beneath the royal authority. A man who understood what it meant to be powerless, who recognized the courage it took to choose freedom over safety. Then, it's decided. Alpha Cedric, I am invoking the ancient right of claim. This Omega is under my personal protection, as of this moment. Any debt she owes to your pack is hereby transferred to me, and I'll settle it before I depart. If you have objections, you're welcome to challenge my claim through formal channels. I'll be happy to hear your case before the Council of Alphas. Cedric's face went pale. Challenging the Alpha King before the Council was technically possible, but it would mean exposing every detail of the Shadowmere Pack's dealings to scrutiny, including, presumably, the exploitation of servant Omegas and the border violations that had brought the king here in the first place. No objections, Your Majesty. The Omega is yours. Excellent, Kira Ashwood. Gather whatever belongings you wish to take. We depart in 1 hour. Kira stood frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. In the span of 10 minutes, her entire life had changed. She was leaving Shadowmere. She was under the Alpha King's protection. She was possibly, impossibly, mated to the most powerful wolf alive. Your Majesty, she managed to say, her voice shaking, I don't have belongings. Nothing worth keeping, anyway. The king's eyes flashed with something that looked like anger, though Kira didn't think it was directed at her. Then we leave now, unless there's someone you need to say goodbye to? Kira thought of the pack members who'd tormented her for 3 years. Marcus and Celine and Damien and all the others who'd made her life unbearable. Thought of Alpha Cedric, who'd exploited her parents' debt. Thought of the storage room that had been her quarters, the endless floors she'd scrubbed, the scars on her back from punishments she hadn't deserved. No, Your Majesty, there's no one. Then let's go. He turned toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. And Kira, when we're alone, you don't need to call me Your Majesty. My name is Caden. Caden. The Alpha King's name was Caden, and he'd just claimed her, saved her, offered her a life beyond the one she'd thought was inescapable. Kira followed him out of the Alpha's chambers, down the hallway where she'd scrubbed floors, just hours ago, past the storage room that had been her prison. They descended the stairs and walked through the pack house's main entrance, where wolves gathered and stared and whispered behind their hands. She saw Marcus in the crowd, his face twisted with shock and confusion. Saw Celine looking pale and frightened. Saw Alpha Cedric watching from the top of the stairs with an expression that promised retribution if their paths ever crossed again. But none of it mattered anymore, because Kira was walking out the door, walking away from everything that had hurt her, walking toward a future she couldn't begin to imagine. The night air was cold against her skin, the stars bright overhead, and with each step away from the pack house, she felt something inside her chest begin to uncurl. Freedom. This was what freedom felt like. Caden led her to where several vehicles waited, massive black SUVs with tinted windows. His guards stood at attention, their expressions carefully neutral, as they watched their king approach with an unknown Omega at his side. If they were surprised by this development, they were too well trained to show it. "This is Kira Ashwood," Caden said simply. "She's under my personal protection. Treat her accordingly." The guards bowed in unison. "Yes, Your Majesty." Caden opened the door to the center vehicle and gestured for Kira to enter. She climbed in, sinking into leather seats softer than anything she'd ever touched, and watched as he slid in beside her. The door closed, and suddenly they were alone in a space that felt both intimate and overwhelming. "Are you all right?" Caden asked quietly as the vehicle began to move. Kira let out a laugh that sounded slightly hysterical even to her own ears. "I don't know. I don't know what I am right now. An hour ago, I was scrubbing floors. Now I'm in a car with the Alpha King. I don't know how to process any of this." "You don't have to process it yet. Just breathe. Just exist. Everything else can wait." But Kira couldn't wait, couldn't stop the questions that were bubbling up inside her like water about to boil over. "Why did you do it? Why did you claim me? Was it because of the bond? Because you felt it too, didn't you?" The mate bond? Caden was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "Yes, I felt it. The moment I saw you, I knew. But Kira, I want you to understand something. I didn't claim you just because of the bond. I claimed you because what I saw in that pack house was wrong. Exploitation dressed up as tradition. Cruelty justified by economics. Even without the bond, I wouldn't have left you there." "But the bond exists," Kira pressed. "We're mates. The moon goddess paired us together. What does that mean? What happens now?" "That depends entirely on you." Caden shifted to face her more fully, and in the dim light of the vehicle's interior, his eyes glowed with that strange amber luminescence. "The mate bond is real. I feel the pull toward you, the recognition, the certainty that we belong together. But Kira, you've spent 3 years having every choice stolen from you. I won't add to that by forcing you into a bond you're not ready for." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when we reach my territory, you'll be given quarters of your own. You'll be treated as an honored guest, not a servant. You'll have time to heal, to figure out who you are beyond the abuse you've suffered. And if, after all that, you decide you want to explore this bond between us, I'll be there. But if you don't, if you choose to leave or to find your own path, I'll support that too." Kira stared at him, trying to understand. "You're the Alpha King. You could just claim me, order me to accept the bond. Who would stop you?" "I would stop me." Caden's voice was firm. "I've spent my entire life fighting against alphas who abuse their power, who take what they want without consent, who treat omegas as property rather than people. I won't become what I despise, even for a mate bond, especially for a mate bond." Something in Kira's chest cracked open at those words. Here was power beyond anything she'd ever imagined, and it was being offered to her with gentleness, with respect, with the kind of consideration she'd thought was a fairy tale. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know how to be anything except what I was, a servant, a punching bag, someone's burden." "Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time, one moment at a time." Caden's hand moved slowly toward hers, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently took her damaged hand in his touch careful around the raw skin and broken nails. "You're not a burden, Kira Ashwood. You're a survivor, and survivors are the strongest wolves I know." Kira felt tears building behind her eyes, hot and insistent. She'd cried so many times over the past 3 years, but always in private, always swallowing the sobs so no one could hear. But here, in this quiet space with this man who'd saved her, the tears finally broke free. She wept for the girl she'd been before her parents died, for the 3 years of abuse and exploitation, for the pack that had broken her and the debt that had trapped her, for every moment of pain and humiliation and desperate loneliness. And through it all, Caden held her hand and said nothing, offering comfort through simple presence rather than empty platitudes. He didn't tell her to stop crying or to be strong. He just existed beside her, solid and real, while she finally released the grief she'd been carrying alone for so long. When the tears finally subsided, leaving her wrung out and exhausted, Kira found her head had somehow ended up resting against Caden's shoulder. She should have pulled away, should have been embarrassed by the display of weakness. But she was too tired to care, and his shoulder was warm and steady beneath her cheek. "Better?" Caden asked softly. "Maybe. I don't know." Kira's voice was hoarse from crying. "Ask me again tomorrow. I will. And the day after that, and the day after that, until the answer is yes." The vehicle continued through the night, carrying her away from everything she'd known and toward a future she couldn't begin to predict. But for the first time in 3 years, Kira allowed herself to feel something she'd thought was dead and buried. Hope, fragile and tentative, but undeniably real. She was free, she was safe, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, there might actually be a life worth living. The journey took 2 days, with stops at secure locations where Caden's guards had arranged accommodations. Each time they stopped, Kira was given a private room, fresh clothes that actually fit, and food that wasn't scraps or leftovers. It should have felt normal, should have been easy to accept. But after 3 years of sleeping in a storage room and eating whatever the pack deemed too poor quality for anyone else, luxury felt dangerous, like a trap waiting to spring. On the second night, unable to sleep in the comfortable bed, Kira found herself wandering the hallway of whatever building they'd stopped at. It was late, past midnight, and she assumed everyone else would be asleep. So she was startled when she rounded a corner and nearly collided with Caden himself. "Can't sleep?" he asked, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "I'm not used to beds that comfortable. They make me nervous." Understanding crossed Caden's face. "The storage room where you slept. What was it like?" Kira hesitated, then figured there was no point in hiding the truth. He'd seen her scrubbing floors with raw hands. He knew what her life had been. Concrete floor, one thin blanket, no heat. "I got used to being cold." Caden's jaw tightened, that barely controlled rage flickering across his expression again. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. You found me when the moon goddess intended. That's what my mother used to say. Everything happens in its time." "Your mother sounds wise. Tell me about her?" And so Kira did. Standing in that quiet hallway in the middle of the night, she told him about her parents, her father who'd been a craftsman, making beautiful things from wood, her mother who'd been a healer, helping wolves who couldn't afford formal medical care, how they'd died defending other pack members during a rogue attack, how the pack had honored them with a funeral, and then immediately presented Kira with a bill for their life debts. "They were good wolves," Kira said quietly. "Better than I'll ever be." "I doubt that very much. Good wolves raise good children. And Kira, everything I've seen suggests you're exactly the person they hoped you'd become." The word settled into her chest like warmth, chasing away some of the cold that had lived there for so long. "Thank you for saying that." "I'm not just saying it. I mean it." Caden paused, then seemed to make a decision. Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her through the building and out onto a balcony that overlooked a valley. The moon was full, hanging low and bright in the sky, painting everything in silver light, and there, spread out below them like something from a dream, was a massive compound of buildings and training grounds and forests stretching toward distant mountains. "This is my territory," Caden said quietly, "the seat of my power. Tomorrow we'll arrive there, and you'll begin your new life. But before that happens, I want you to understand something. That place down there, it's not perfect. There are problems and conflicts and wolves who don't always get along. But it's built on principles that matter to me. Consent, justice, the belief that strength is measured by how you treat the weakest among you, not how you dominate them." He turned to look at her, his amber eyes serious. "You've spent 3 years in a place that violated all those principles. So I need you to know that where we're going is different. Not perfect, but different. And if at any point it's not what you need, if you feel unsafe or unwanted or trapped in any way, you tell me, and we'll figure out another solution. Your freedom matters more than any bond." Kira felt something shift inside her chest. Not the mate bond, though that was there too, humming quietly between them. This was something deeper, more fundamental. Trust, the beginning of it anyway. Fragile and new, but undeniably real. "What if I'm not strong enough for this?" she asked quietly. "What if I can't be what you need? What if being your mate means responsibilities I'm not capable of handling?" Caden's expression softened. "Then we'll adapt. Kira, I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm not asking you to transform overnight into some idealized version of a Luna. I'm asking you to heal, to discover who you are beneath the trauma. And whatever that turns out to be, whatever you choose to become, that's exactly what I want." You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. But you won't do it alone. They stood there in the moonlight for a long time, looking out over the territory that would become her home. And for the first time since her parents died, Kira allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by pain. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. When they finally went back inside, Kira slept better than she had in years, and if she dreamed of amber eyes and gentle hands and a voice that promised safety, she didn't question it. Some things were worth hoping for, even if hope was dangerous. The next morning they completed the final leg of the journey. As they drove through the gates of Caden's territory, Kira pressed her face to the window, taking in everything. The compound was even more impressive up close. Buildings made of stone and wood, designed to blend with the natural landscape rather than dominate it. Training grounds where wolves in human form practice combat techniques. Gardens where older pack members tended to plants. Children playing in open courtyards under the watchful eyes of their parents. It looked like a community, like a place where people belong to each other rather than being owned by each other. The vehicle stopped in front of the largest building, and Caden's guards immediately moved into formation. But before the door could be opened, Caden turned to Kira one more time. "Last chance to change your mind. We can turn around right now if you want. No judgment, no consequences." Kira looked at him, at this man who'd saved her and was still offering her choices. "I don't want to turn around. I want to see what happens next." "Then let's find out together." The guards opened the door, and Kira stepped out into her new life. Wolves were gathering, drawn by news of their king's return. She could feel their eyes on her, curious and assessing, Some of them would be judging her, she knew, wondering why the Alpha King had brought home an unknown Omega. But their judgment couldn't hurt her the way Shadowmere's had, because these wolves didn't have power over her. Caden did, and he'd already proven he would use that power to protect rather than exploit. A woman approached, older and elegant, with silver hair and kind eyes. "Your Majesty, welcome home. We weren't expecting you to return with a guest. Kira, this is Elena, my head of household. She'll help you get settled." Caden turned to Elena. "This is Kira Ashwood. She's under my personal protection, and she'll be staying in the guest suite in the East Wing. Make sure she has everything she needs: clothes, supplies, access to the healers if she wants it. And Elena, make sure everyone understands that she's to be treated with the utmost respect." Elena's eyes sharpened, taking in Kira's appearance with a practiced gaze that seemed to see everything. The too thin frame, the healing hands, the wariness in her posture. Whatever conclusions she drew, she kept them to herself. "Of course, Your Majesty, my lady, if you'll follow me." Kira glanced at Caden, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead. I have some matters to attend to, but I'll find you later. If you need anything before then, just ask Elena. She runs this entire compound and knows where everything is." Following Elena through the building was like entering a different world. The hallways were wide and well lit, decorated with artwork and tapestries. Other wolves moved through the space with purpose but not urgency, nodding respectfully to Elena as they passed. No one shrank against the walls or averted their eyes. No one bore the marks of recent punishment or the hollow expression of someone who'd given up hope. "Here we are," Elena said, opening a door to reveal a suite that was larger than the entire storage room Kira had lived in for 3 years. There was a sitting area with comfortable furniture, a bedroom with an actual bed covered in soft blankets, and a bathroom that gleamed with cleanliness. Windows overlooked the gardens, letting in natural light that made everything feel warm and welcoming. "This can't be right," Kira said automatically. "This is too much. I don't need all this space." Elena's expression gentled with understanding. "His Majesty was very clear about your accommodations. This is yours for as long as you want it. And my lady, I've served him for 20 years. I've never seen him invoke the right of claim before. Whatever your story is, it matters to him, which means it matters to all of us. I don't have a story. I'm just an Omega who got lucky. Luck is what you make of it. Now I'll have food sent up, and there are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit. If they don't, let me know, and I'll have them adjusted. There's also a bell pull by the door. If you need anything, ring it and someone will come immediately." After Elena left, Kira stood in the middle of the suite, trying to process the reality of her situation. Yesterday she'd been scrubbing floors with raw hands. Today she was standing in luxury she'd never imagined, being treated like someone important. The whiplash was almost too much to handle. She moved to the bathroom, drawn by the promise of actual hot water. The tub was enormous, and when she turned the faucet, steam rose in inviting clouds. Kira stripped off her clothes, the ones Caden's people had given her during the journey, and sank into water that was almost too hot but felt like heaven against her skin. As she soaked, she examined her hands. The rawness was already healing, the cracks less severe than they'd been 2 days ago. Her body was starting to recover, filling out slightly from regular meals, but the scars remained, both visible and invisible. The ones on her back from punishments, the ones on her psyche from 3 years of systematic cruelty. Healing from those wouldn't happen overnight, might never happen completely. But for the first time, Kira allowed herself to believe that healing was possible at all. She was still in the bath when she heard a knock on the outer door. "Come in," she called. assuming it was someone bringing food, but the voice that responded was male and familiar. "It's Caden. I can come back later if you're not ready for company." Kira's heart rate kicked up. "No, it's fine. I'm just in the bath. Give me a minute." She climbed out quickly, wrapping herself in a towel that was softer than anything she'd ever touched, and pulled on a robe that hung on the bathroom door. When she emerged, she found Caden standing by the windows, giving her privacy while she dressed. "Sorry for the intrusion," he said, without turning around. "I wanted to make sure you were settling in all right." "I'm fine. This is all just very overwhelming." "I imagine so. Going from what you had to this is a significant adjustment." He finally turned to face her, and his expression was carefully neutral. "There's something we need to discuss. Something I should have mentioned earlier but wanted to wait until we were somewhere private." Kira's stomach clenched. Here it was, the catch, the price she'd have to pay for her rescue. "What is it?" "The mate bond. We both felt it, and we both know what it means. But Kira, bonds can be rejected. It's painful and difficult, but it's possible. If you decide that's what you want, if the idea of being mated to me is something you can't accept, I'll help you through the rejection process. I'll make sure you're supported and that you still have a place here even afterward." Of all the things Kira had expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. "You'd let me reject you, even though we're fated mates?" "Fate is a guide, not a prison. The moon goddess pairs wolves who are compatible. But that doesn't mean we're required to act on it. You've had enough of your life dictated by forces beyond your control. I won't add to that by insisting you accept a bond you don't want." Kira studied him, this powerful alpha who was offering her a choice that most wolves would never consider giving. "What do you want, Caden? Not as a king, but as a person. Do you want this bond?" He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "Yes. From the moment I saw you, something in me recognized you as mine. My wolf has been restless ever since, wanting to claim you, to protect you, to build a life with you. But what I want doesn't override what you need. And right now, you need time and space and the freedom to make your own choices. What if I make the wrong choice? There is no wrong choice, only the choice that's right for you." He moved closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "Kira, I'm not going anywhere. Whether you accept this bond today, in a year, or never, I'll still be here, still offering protection, still ensuring you have everything you need to build whatever life you want." The sincerity in his words, the absolute conviction behind them, made something in Kira's chest ache. She'd spent 3 years being told she was worthless, being treated like her wants and needs didn't matter. And now here was the most powerful wolf in the territories telling her that her choices were paramount, that her autonomy was worth more than even a fated bond. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to figure out who I am when I'm not just trying to survive. I need to heal, and I need to know that if I do accept this bond, it's because I genuinely want it, not because I'm grateful you saved me, or because I'm afraid of being alone again. Then take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready, if you're ever ready." They stood there in the soft light from the windows, the mate bond humming quietly between them. It would have been easy to give in, to accept the bond and let herself be swept away by the connection. But Kira had spent 3 years being powerless, and she wasn't ready to surrender her newfound autonomy, even to something as tempting as a fated mate. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for understanding, for giving me a choice. You deserve choices, Kira. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. I just hope I get to be part of helping you find it." Over the following weeks, Kira began to settle into her new life. Elena introduced her to the pack's healers, who examined her thoroughly and prescribed both physical therapy for her damaged hands and something they called trauma counseling for the psychological wounds. At first, Kira resisted the counseling, insisting she was fine, that she didn't need to talk about what had happened. But the healer, a kind Omega named Mara, who specialized in helping abuse survivors, was persistent. Trauma doesn't just disappear because your circumstances have improved, Mara explained during their first real session. It lives in your body, in your reactions, in the way you perceive the world. We need to help you process it, so it doesn't control you. So Kira talked about her parents' deaths and the debt that followed, about the 3 years of servitude and abuse, about the casual cruelty of wolves like Marcus and Celine who'd tormented her because they could, about the way Alpha Cedric had exploited her, adding charges to keep her trapped, about the storage room and the cold and the endless work that was never good enough. And slowly, painfully, she began to understand that none of it had been her fault. The abuse hadn't happened because she was weak or worthless. It had happened because some wolves were cruel, and they'd found an easy target in a grieving, powerless Omega with no one to protect her. You survived, Mara said during one session, not just physically but emotionally. You maintained your compassion, your sense of self, your ability to hope. That takes incredible strength, Kira. Don't discount it. Between counseling sessions, Kira explored the territory. She discovered the library filled with more books than she'd ever seen in one place. She found the training grounds where wolves of all ranks practiced together without the rigid hierarchy that had defined Shadowmere. She met pack members who treated her with kindness rather than contempt, who asked about her interests and opinions like they genuinely mattered. And she spent time with Caden, carefully and cautiously building something that might eventually become friendship. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. They would have meals together, take walks through the gardens, sit in comfortable silence while reading in the library. He told her about his life, about the burden of leadership and the loneliness that came with being the most powerful wolf in the territories, about his own parents' deaths when he was barely 20, thrust into kingship before he was ready, about the mistakes he'd made and the lessons he'd learned. I used to think strength meant never showing vulnerability, he admitted one evening as they sat on a balcony watching the sunset. That being king meant being invincible, but that just made me isolated and ineffective. Real strength is admitting when you're wrong, asking for help when you need it, and being willing to change when circumstances demand it. Is that why you're so patient with me? Kira asked. Because you understand that healing takes time? I'm patient with you because you're worth patience. But yes, I understand that some wounds run deep. My own took years to heal, and some of them never fully did. I just learned to live with the scars. Kira looked at him, at the way the fading light caught the bronze in his hair, at the strength in his profile, and the gentleness in his expression when he looked at her. The mate bond pulled at her constantly, wanting her to close the distance between them, to accept what the moon goddess had offered. But Kira held back, needing to be sure. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after her arrival, Kira was in the library when she overheard a conversation between 2 pack members who didn't realize she was in the next aisle over. I don't understand why he hasn't just claimed her, a female voice said. She's his fated mate. What's he waiting for? You know how His Majesty is about consent, a male voice responded. He won't force anything, even with his own mate. But she's been here for weeks. Surely she's had enough time to adjust. What if she rejects him? What if she breaks the bond? Then he'll survive it. He survived losing his parents and taking the throne at 20. He'll survive this too. It seems cruel, though, making him wait when the bond must be driving his wolf insane. Kira felt guilt twist in her stomach. She'd been so focused on her own healing, her own needs, that she hadn't fully considered what her hesitation was costing Caden. The mate bond pulled at her constantly, a gentle but persistent tug. For him, with his alpha nature, it must be so much worse. Yet he'd never complained, never pressured her, never made her feel like she owed him anything. She found him that evening in his private study, reviewing reports from various packs under his jurisdiction. When she knocked, he looked up with a smile that made her chest warm. "Kira, this is a pleasant surprise. Come in." She entered, closing the door behind her. "I need to talk to you about something." His expression shifted to concern. "Is everything all right? Has someone done something to make you uncomfortable?" "No, nothing like that. Everyone's been wonderful. It's just, I overheard something today. Pack members talking about us, about the bond, about how I'm making you wait." Caden's jaw tightened slightly. "Who was it?" "I'll speak with them about respecting your privacy." "That's not the point. The point is they're right. I've been so focused on my own healing that I haven't thought about what this is costing you. The bond must be difficult for you." "The bond is mine to manage," Caden said firmly. "You're not responsible for my comfort, Kira. You're responsible for your own healing and nothing else. But that's not fair to you. You saved me, brought me here, given me everything I need to heal, and I'm repaying that by making you suffer." Caden stood and moved around the desk, coming to stand in front of her. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not making me suffer. You're not punishing me by taking time to heal, and you certainly don't owe me acceptance of this bond as payment for basic decency. I claimed you because leaving you in that situation would have violated everything I believe in. The bond is separate from that. But the bond exists. We both feel it. And I know enough about alpha biology to know that having an unclaimed mate nearby must be driving your wolf crazy. My wolf is fine. Restless sometimes, yes. But he understands that you need time, and more importantly, I understand that rushing you would be the worst thing I could do." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hands. "Kira, if you're feeling pressured, if you think you need to accept this bond before you're ready, please tell me. I'll create more distance, give you more space, whatever you need." Kira looked down at their joined hands, at the way his larger ones engulfed hers with careful gentleness. The truth was, she didn't want more distance. Over the past 6 weeks, she'd come to value his presence, to look forward to their conversations, to feel safe in a way she never had before. The mate bond was part of that, but it wasn't the whole story. She was falling for him as a person, not just responding to biological imperative. "What if I'm ready?" she asked quietly. "Not completely, maybe. I still have healing to do, and I'm still figuring out who I am. But what if I'm ready to start exploring this bond, to see where it leads?" Caden's eyes widened, hope flaring in those amber depths before he carefully banked it. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel rushed or obligated. I'm sure that I want to try. I'm sure that when I imagine my future, you're in it. I'm sure that the bond isn't the only reason I care about you." She took a breath, gathering courage. "I'm sure that I'm falling in love with you, Caden. Not the Alpha King, you. The man who gives me choices and respects my boundaries and makes me feel like I matter." The smile that spread across his face was radiant. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that. Then why didn't you tell me? Because telling you would have been pressure, and pressure was the last thing you needed. He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. But Kira, I need you to know something. I'm falling in love with you too. Have been, since the moment you stood up from that floor in Shadowmere, covered in dirty water and still brave enough to meet my eyes. You're extraordinary, and I'm honored that you're willing to give this bond a chance. So what happens now? Now we take it slow. We continue building what we've started. We learn each other. And when you're ready, when you're absolutely certain, we make the bond official. But there's no timeline, no pressure. We move at your pace. Kira felt something settle inside her, a rightness that had nothing to do with fate and everything to do with choice. Can I ask you something? When you walked into that room and saw me, what did you think? Honestly, I thought the Alpha of Shadowmere was an idiot for wasting someone with your strength. And then the bond hit, and I thought the moon goddess must have a sense of humor, pairing me with someone I'd just met. But then you stood up, and you looked at me, and I thought maybe the goddess knew exactly what she was doing. She did, Kira said softly. She gave me someone who would see me as more than just an omega to be used, someone who would offer me choices instead of demands, someone who would wait while I found myself. And she gave me someone who survived hell and came out still capable of kindness. Someone strong enough to take time when she needs it instead of just accepting what she's offered. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. They stood there in the quiet study, hands joined, the mate bond humming with satisfaction. And when Caden leaned down slowly, giving Kira every opportunity to pull away, she rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was gentle and sweet and perfect, not desperate or demanding, but tender, a promise of what could be rather than a claim of what was owed. And when they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. I still need time, Kira said, before we make this official, before we do the mating ceremony and everything that comes with it. Then take it. I'll be here. And I still need to keep working with Mara, keep healing from what happened. Of course, your healing is the most important thing. And I want to do something meaningful here, not just exist as your mate, but contribute somehow. Maybe work with other Omegas who've been through trauma. Help them the way Mara's been helping me. Caden's eyes lit up. That's a brilliant idea. We have several Omegas in the pack who've come from difficult situations. Having someone who understands what they're going through would be invaluable. Over the following months, Kira and Caden's relationship deepened naturally. They spent time together daily, but Kira maintained her own space and independence. She began training with Mara to become a counselor herself, learning techniques for helping trauma survivors. She started working with young Omegas in the pack, teaching them that their worth wasn't determined by their rank or their strength, but by their character and choices. And slowly, carefully, she let herself believe that she deserved the life she was building, that she wasn't broken or worthless or weak, that surviving 3 years of abuse had made her stronger, not lesser. One evening, nearly 8 months after her arrival, Kira found Caden on the same balcony where he'd first shown her the territory. The moon was full again, hanging bright and beautiful in the night sky. "I've been thinking," she said, as she joined him at the railing, "about the bond, about us, about what I want for my future." Caden turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral despite the hope she could see in his eyes. "And what did you decide?" I decided that I'm ready, not because I'm grateful you saved me, though I am, not because the bond demands it, though I feel that too, but because I love you, because you've shown me what it means to be valued and respected and cherished, because when I imagine spending the rest of my life with someone, there's only one face I see. Kira. Her name came out rough with emotion. Are you absolutely certain? Because once we make this official, once we complete the mating bond, there's no going back. I know, and I'm certain. I love you, Caden. I choose you. I choose this bond, this life, this future we can build together. The smile that spread across his face was brighter than the moon above them. Then I accept your choice with everything I am. I love you, Kira Ashwood, not as a king, but as a man, as your mate, as your partner for all the years we're given. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their first kiss, deeper, more passionate, carrying the weight of 8 months of waiting and wanting and choosing. The mate bond blazed between them, recognizing the acceptance, the mutual choice, the love that had grown from careful patience rather than instant claiming. When do you want to do the ceremony? Caden asked when they finally broke apart. Soon. I don't want to wait anymore. I've spent enough of my life waiting, surviving, existing. I want to start living. The mating ceremony was held 2 weeks later under a full moon that seemed to shine just for them. The entire pack attended, along with alphas from allied territories who wanted to witness their king's mating. Kira wore a dress of silver and white, her hair adorned with flowers, looking nothing like the broken Omega who'd been scrubbing floors 9 months earlier. As she walked toward Caden, who waited for her at the center of the ceremonial ground, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the abuse and exploitation. The night Caden had walked into that chamber and changed everything, the choice he'd given her, over and over again, to shape her own future. When she reached him, he took her hands in his amber eyes glowing with love and pride. The officiant, an elder from the pack, began the traditional words, but before he could finish, Kira spoke, her voice clear and strong. I, Kira Ashwood, choose you, Caden, as my mate, not because fate demanded it, but because my heart does. Not because you saved me, but because you gave me the space to save myself. Not because you're the Alpha King, but because you're the man who saw worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself. I choose you freely, completely, and forever. Caden's voice was thick with emotion as he responded. I, Caden, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, choose you, Kira Ashwood, as my mate. You are my equal, my partner, my heart. I vow to honor your autonomy always. I vow to support your healing and growth. I vow to love you not despite your scars, but because of the strength they represent. I choose you freely, completely, and forever. When Caden marked her, claiming her as his mate before the entire assembly, the bond between them blazed like a star. Kira felt it settle deep in her chest, warm and permanent and perfect. She was no longer a servant Omega. She was a Luna, a healer, a survivor who'd found her strength in the darkest moments and emerged, ready to help others find theirs. The celebration lasted long into the night, but eventually Caden and Kira slipped away to their private chambers. Not separate rooms anymore, but shared space that they'd designed together. A place that was truly home. Any regrets? Caden asked as they stood on their balcony, watching the moon set. None. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner, that you had to suffer for 3 years before I could help. Kira turned to face him, cupping his cheek with her hand. If you'd found me sooner, I wouldn't have been ready. I needed to hit bottom before I could start climbing back up. I needed to lose everything before I could appreciate what I was being given. The timing was exactly what it needed to be. You're wise beyond your years. I'm a survivor. That's different. It's both. They went inside together, and as Kira settled into bed beside her mate, she thought about the girl she'd been. Kira, who'd scrubbed floors with raw hands, who'd been told she was worthless, who'd believed that survival was the best she could hope for. That girl was gone, transformed through pain and healing into someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth, someone who'd chosen love not from desperation or gratitude, but from genuine affection and respect. Years later, when young wolves would come to Luna Kira seeking help, feeling broken or worthless or alone, she would tell them her story, not to claim she was special, but to show them that surviving didn't make you weak, that healing was possible, that the darkest moments could lead to the most beautiful futures if you were brave enough to keep going. I was bullied, she would tell them. I was exploited and abused and told I was nothing, but I survived. And surviving taught me that my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me, but by who I chose to become despite that treatment. You are not your trauma. You are what you build from its ashes. And if some young Omega, listening with tears in their eyes, found their hope rekindled, if they left believing for the first time that maybe they weren't broken, after all, then Kira knew she'd fulfilled her purpose. She'd become the person she needed when she was lost and alone. She'd become someone who helped others find their way home. She was no longer the Omega everyone bullied. She was the Luna who understood pain and chose kindness anyway, who knew what it meant to be powerless and used that knowledge to protect the vulnerable, who had survived hell and emerged determined to make sure no one else had to face it alone. And every night, as she fell asleep in her mate's arms, she thanked the moon goddess for the cruelty that had broken her, and the man who'd helped her rebuild herself into something stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. Because sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we need to be. Sometimes being broken is the first step toward becoming whole, and sometimes the Alpha King who scents you and says mine is actually offering you the greatest gift of all, the freedom to choose yourself first, and then choose him because you want to, not because you have to. Kira Ashwood had been bullied, exploited, and cast aside, but she'd survived, she'd healed, she'd chosen love, and she'd built a life that proved everyone who'd ever dismissed her absolutely, completely, devastatingly wrong.